Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Newth from Tenable, and I am the head of product marketing for cloud and identity. And today we're covering an interesting topic, which I think everyone who has cloud security is involved with in some sense or knows well, and that's integrating my cloud security solution with basically everything else. That's why we're calling this breaking the silos between cloud security and everything else, because it's just that. Cloud security has grown like a behemoth over the last 5 years, and for good reason. The pace at which apps are released in the cloud just outpace about just about everything else. And therefore, cloud security has kind of grown up around long-standing parts of the organization and stakeholders within an organization controlling, AppSec development in the cloud. Of course, cloud security has emerged as a more important part of the cloud security, the security team. But then long-standing, we have identity and vulnerability management teams, which are a cornerstone of security and continue to be a cornerstone of cloud security, but also on-prem and everything in between, right? They are leading vulnerability management for hybrid organizations, which is just about every organization today. Then we have GRC or compliance. This is a behemoth that changes all the time as well, and it's connected how well you are able to identify threats, prioritize them, document them, and as you know, they're inseparable. And of course, we have the SecOps side of the house from CDR, cloud detection and response, as well as conventional SIEM and SOAR products. So what do we do about this? This is kind of where this presentation and this perspective of Tenable is really unique. We grew up with vulnerability management as our foundation, and it's a really great strength of us. But we also are the leader. If you look at Gartner's inaugural release of exposure management, we are the leader in that domain as well. And that sits above all of these different people in the organization and all of these different domains in these technology sectors. And that's no small feat. So that's an underlying principle of how we at Tenable are optimizing workflows and bridging gaps. And we've seen three or four gaps. One is the shift left gap, the gap that exists between IT and ASPM or attack surface posture management tools that AppSec and development folks are using, and that budget usually comes from IT. But the problem is that has big implications on obviously cloud apps and basically going from production from development into production, and vulnerabilities could find their way into the development team as well and not be seen. And that's a problem for cloud security personas buying cloud security solutions or CNAPPs. And that's a problem for vulnerability management analysts buying vulnerability management scanners. So there's another overlap that we see there between conventional CWP or cloud workload protection or CSPM tools and unified vulnerability management. And then furthermore, once we actually identify vulnerabilities, we prioritize them, we want to institute a patch, we need to hand it over to patch document that's been done well for compliance. And that is another gap or overlap. And the reason why these are gaps and why these are important is because while tools are linked to different areas of the business or the organization, vulnerabilities aren't. They have lateral movement. They are measured differently according to the scope or context in which you're able to assess them by. For example, if you see a vulnerability on-prem on a container, for example, your window is small. If you realize that vulnerability is conducting lateral movement or came from the AppSec team, your scope of measuring that risk is lower or inaccurate, and your ability to remediate it is limited. The problem here is that cloud environments change by the minute, and therefore misconfigurations and identity sprawl across the expanding cloud service increase company risk, and they bury security teams in alerts. The need to eliminate alert noise is a huge issue with a lot of customers, either in the cloud security market or in the vulnerability management market, or I guess you could say teams. And Tenable is bringing clarity and unification to do that. So how does Tenable help? Well, you can see that exposure management is encapsulating. That's why we're the leader. And that's why CNAPP is just below that. There's so much purview and overlap between vulnerability management at our core and all the other peripheral solutions that aid basically a modern organization on their cloud journey. And that all needs to fall and link to exposure management. Oops. So with that said, let's jump into a demo and examine how that works. Now, when we talked about cloud security and integrating with everything else, a key part of that is making sure it contributes to a unified view of risk. So alerts, vulnerabilities, for example, are prioritized across the organization. CISOs onto the vulnerability management personas within the organization or cloud security are all playing from the same sheet of music, so to speak, or more appropriately, they're able to prioritize alerts and risks appropriately and remediate them together and holistically. And a key part of doing that is through exposure management. That's why Tenable's invested so heavily in Tenable exposure management. And this is a great place to start the demo because it links the exposure management dashboard to all parts of the organization, including cloud security. So if we click straight through here, you can see of gaining an ecosystem view of risk, it means a lot more than just seeing everything. It allows you to quickly drill down and assess yourself over time. This macro view allows you to gain or ascertain your organization's overall exposure to risk against benchmarks that are out of box or defined by you. Then you can drill into specific aspects of the organization, for example, your cloud security exposure. And then there we already are delving into our risk posture within as it applies to CNAPP. Similar to your organization's overall exposure score, you are now looking at cloud security exposure scores and how you defined, are you fair against defined metrics or those benchmarks that you set. You can also see how you are functioning over time and how it's improved or diminished with key incidences or your remediation workflow and speed. You can also adjust SLAs, and this is great for gamification or holding multi-departmental or multi-cloud environments accountable. And you can drill into how your organization's remediation progress is happening over time, reviewing the distribution of remediated and non-remediated risks, and what that actually means for your organization. But that's the link to exposure management and cloud security, essentially cloud security integrating with your solution stack. What about making sure we're able to address shift left, address all threats across the cloud ecosystem or the life cycle, if you will, from shift left, from DevOps into apps going into production and into response. So if we go through the short demo that everyone's able to see themselves, should they have interest in it, you can see that cloud security from Tenable has full coverage of all major cloud service providers, and we have massive comprehensive views of all the resources at your disposal, from IAM resources, even IoT resources, of course, container and Kubernetes, and things to this nature. Now, really quick look through the product of how it functions is contextualization and prioritization. Now, as you know, Tenable is known for vulnerability prioritization rating or VPR. It really goes beyond CVSS scores for vulnerabilities and allows our cloud security stakeholders or vulnerability management stakeholders for that will to really understand vulnerabilities everywhere in their organization. So you can explore your organization's security posture here from a macro view. You also have the ability to create projects, which allows the organization to logically group accounts and resources, making it a lot easier to manage with a lot of teams. We also take a deep look into toxic combinations, right? Vulnerability risk ratings, if you use CVSS, don't have the context of, for example, does it have access to lateral movement and PI, for example? So let's take a look at an EC2 instance as an example of what this actually means. In this particular example, we got a full list of EC2 instances that require attention. Now let's go jump into one of these specifically. And in this one, we can see that once we've selected this finding, we were able to see exposed resource and a lot of the information around that. And then we find in this instance has a critical vulnerability attached to it. In fact, many. And it's accessible to the internet as an overprivileged IAM role to it, making it a perfect candidate for something that needs to be addressed now. This toxic combination risk is super important. And now it's also knowing who's responsible for fixing what. And we can quickly, reach out to the resource right now to make sure that this is completed. Then you can return to your dashboards, make sure that this vulnerability is remediated and those that are held accountable are logged in the SLA that we first covered in the first demo. And that's how it works. All right, that concludes our demo with Dark Reading. Thank you so much again. My name's Thomas Knuth. I really hope that look into Tenable's exposure management platform, linking and drilling quickly into cloud security, really helps show why that connection between exposure management, cloud security, and all the other peripheral solutions that help you identify and measure the implications of secrets, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, identity, and public exposures are so useful. It provides unified vision. You want to be able to play by the same sheet of music, whether you're the CISO, whether you are the cloud security leader, while you are the vulnerability management leader. It doesn't matter. Risks need to be seen across your entire attack surface with unified insights so you can gain control and ascertain that critical context to prioritize accurately. And then again, unify action, mobilize response across the teams to eradicate it across your organization. Thank you.